Hello and welcome to the EFN Presents review of the My Little Pony comic issue 15. As always guys, this review will contain spoilers, so if you want to read the comic first, go and check it out and then come on back. The team of Newfer, Meberson, and Breckle return for their second two-part story with part one of... there's no title. Okay, hold on. We'll think of something. Title aside, this episode centers around the characters battling a powerful evil inside the library. Not that library. You know what? Never mind. This happens to be the last in the line of two-book arcs in the comics, which started with the Art of Gazebo Repair in issue 9. While the Katie Cook arcs seem to focus more on slice-of-life stories, Newfer's stories have remained more fantastic or adventure-oriented. But a common thread is the difference in the pacing between these issues and the 4-issue arcs. While the 4-issue arcs laid out most of their cards in the first issue, with later issues showing a gradual progression of the villain's plan, the two-parters have favored a stealthier approach by setting up the climax in the first issue, but holding its cards until the final pages. This approach has been wildly successful, insofar as it's turned rather unassuming stories, such as Big Mac searching for a box of nails, or the ponies in a Pirates of the Caribbean parody, into wonderfully crafted stories that combine entertaining narrative with deftly crafted lessons that have been quietly building up since the word go. Unfortunately, it also means that the first issues of these arcs are in sort of a limbo until the second issue comes along, and that's no more apparent than in the comic we're discussing today. Cover A for this issue, by Amy Meberson, nicely lays out the elements of the story without spoiling the details. The cocoons up in the shadows of the ceiling are suitably ominous, and having most of the characters' attention on Starswirl the Bearded's torn-up book, that's blue now for some reason, hint at it being more important to the comic. Sticking to 3 characters avoids the composition feeling crowded, but the head-on view feels a little awkward. We rarely get a straight view of the characters from the front, so naturally Twilight's expression comes off a little strange. While the story feels very busy with the characters jumping between books in pursuit of the worm, the choices it makes are pretty well thought out. The Ponyville side of the story is very economical. In just 4 pages, once the characters are inside the books, they reveal the contents of the pods to be the characters from the library books, that they are, or at least behave like, the characters they're supposed to represent, and that the town has become overrun by these characters, bad guys especially, and the bookworm's power, or at least size, is far greater than when they tried to dispatch him earlier, stacking the deck against the ponies for the next issue. While the bookworm is the likely culprit from early on, he's unassuming enough to require some development. Each story the ponies travel through provides some logical progression to this aim, as well as taking advantage of the opportunities Twilight's narrative navigation provides for. The fantasy story is a quick tutorial, laying out the rules for the reader, as well as showing the impact the characters have on the books, and the worm escapes without incident, prompting the ponies to pursue. The Daring Do story allows the bookworm to reveal himself somewhat, requiring the main 6 to escape. Also, interleaving this story showing Daring Do's absence with the scene in Ponyville of Daring Do coming out of the cocoon reinforces that these really are the characters from the books being taken out of their worlds. And the romance story with Rarity reveals the magnitude of the bookworm's power as he dispatches the ponies to the void, setting up the next issue as chaos in Ponyville erupts. While these scenes are rushed with just 2 and 3 pages for the fantasy and romance books respectively, the comic has a lot to set up for the second half, as it's introducing new rules to the world and new creatures, while previous comics were able to leverage existing antagonists and so could devote more time to the narrative itself. The reference to the Power Ponies episode was surprising, considering that it wasn't that long ago the episode aired, and we haven't seen much direct continuity between the cartoon and the comics before. But it works great here, as it saves the comic from a great deal of explaining for the reader, assuming you have seen the cartoon as well. For taking place in both the comic world and Ponyville simultaneously, the balance of the characters is accomplished fairly well. The splitting up of the characters as they enter the book keeps the majority of the ponies with the action, but keeping both Applejack and Fluttershy outside allows for some interaction of the main characters in the Ponyville subplot. While the Applejack-Fluttershy dynamic isn't really capitalized on, it leaves the door open for some very diametrically opposed views to both confront and avoid any action that takes place. While questions abound by the end, it's hard to argue that any confusion on the part of the reader is not intentional, as what the comic reveals, it reveals clearly, often blending with other story elements. On my first reading, I couldn't shake the flashbacks to poorly written, literacy-focused PSAs from the 80s and 90s. I cannot think of a worse way to denigrate this comic than by that comparison. That said, a couple of opportunities managed to slip by Twilight somehow. Here's a couple of ways the whole ordeal could have been avoided. The bug's in front of you. Squash it. The bug's hiding behind the book. Turn the book around. You're an alicorn. Hold the bug in place with magic. The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. Burn the book with the worm inside. Put the book in a box and bury it. Let Spike magic that book to Celestia and let her deal with it. Even the pursuit of the bookworm itself is a little suspect. The bookworm is eating the actual book. How does it magic itself inside the book? How do the characters know which book it went into after? AJ and Fluttershy aren't around. If following the bookworm into the stories is causing damage, don't follow it into the stories. Then again, they probably need the bug to restore all those book characters back to their proper place, so what do I know? Plot foibles aside, the comic is visually strong. There aren't many visual gags, but Fluttershy in the welder's clothes and Twilight curled up in the bookshelf are nice inclusions. We're no stranger to Meberson's work at this point, so it's no surprise we have strong backgrounds throughout, and while expressions sometimes fall flat, there are some real gems, like early on with Twilight's book-fueled breakdown. Leveraging the variety of genres the ponies travel through, the art style adapts to suit. Most of this is represented through the costuming of the characters, but the romance selection stands out with their inner monologue narration and dramatic framing. The scenes inside the library books are nicely delineated, with a mild texture to the backgrounds, a subtle sepia effect in the Daring Do story, and torn, chewed, or otherwise distressed panel edges. Breaking the fourth wall, once removed, at times with the characters observing the damage as they discuss the situation. And the scenes of the void use negative space and blurred borders for a look that really contrasts with the rest of the comic. An effect that is sorely needed because I cannot imagine anything more boring to look at than a blank panel. The visual variety complements the parallel storylines taking place and really gives something to look forward to with the numerous style changes. While my first impression was rocky, I definitely want to see how Newfer brings this story around in the second half. So tune in next time as we go over the exciting conclusion of... Okay, where did those titles go? The Malevolent Manuscript Masticator, or The Girly Nerd Gets the Worm.